Welcome to Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm Susan Haskins, and that was the wonderful Shangilia Youth Choir of Nairobi, Kenya.
And they are appearing now in Black Nativity, produced by the Classical Theater of Harlem at the Duke Theater on West 42nd Street. And we're going to hear more from the choir in a bit. But first, we want to welcome to Theater Talk the star of Black Nativity, the great, the fabulous Tony Award-winning actor, Andre DeShields.
Namaste.
Namaste.
I got to take exception to being the star of Black Nativity. I'm just one of the stars in that great constellation. It is an ensemble. I just want to make that clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Black Nativity by Langston Hughes.
Langston Hughes, yeah.
Can you give us a bit of a history of the show, when he wrote it?
Yes. Langston Hughes, as I hope we all know, was the poet laureate of the Harlem Renaissance.
Of course.
He was one of the architects of the concept of the new Negro. Langston Hughes is also remembered as arguably one of the greatest writers, American writers of the 20th century. He was an essayist, he was a novelist. He's most remembered as a poet. His most famous poem probably being Harlem, What Happens to a Dream Deferred, the poem from which Lorraine Hansberry borrowed the title for A Raisin in the Sun. Late in Langston's career, he claimed this greatest story that was ever told for Black America and created a piece which was originally called What a Mighty Day. And then when it premiered on Broadway in 1961, it was called Black Nativity, which starred, now here's a little controversy for you, which starred Alvin Ailey and Carmen de Lavallade, who took exception to working in a piece called Black Nativity because their perspective then was a bit of separatism. We hadn't quite made that transition from being Negro to Black is beautiful. But all that's, you know, water under the bridge.
Interesting.
Now,
so did they fight with Langston Hughes at all about the title?
Not really fight, but you know, newspaper people.
My ear would have been to the ground then.
Tempest and teapots and that sort of thing. So 46 years later, we are the first Broadway revival of Black Nativity.
Yeah. And now you're playing street preacher, Times Square preacher, right?
The character I play is multifaceted. Now, when you see me first in the play, I am performing as a Black Hebrew Nubian Canaanite. Now, and they're still around, but if you remember the early 70s on Times Square, when this city was in need of transformation, there were these groups of young Black men who considered themselves the lost tribe of Israel.
Oh, they're still out there.
They're still around, but they've moved from Times Square down to Herald Square.
Oh.
And my first appearance in the show is that kind of iconic figure. You know, breathing fire and brimstone. And then through the magic of theater, we transform into a non-denominational church, and I come back as the pastor of the church, and then we tell the Langston Hughes version of the Nativity.
And the version of Langston Hughes' version is that Mary and Joseph are traveling around New York trying to find a place to give birth to Jesus.
No.
You want to pick that up again?
I thought that's...
No, we want to be clear about this. That's the director's tweaking
of the
Langston Hughes story. And the director is Alfred Preiser, who's also the artistic director of the Classical Theater of Harlem, who has made a reputation of jumping off of precipices and walking on edges. It makes total sense that we would place the story of the Black Nativity in 1973. First of all, because, as I said before, New York was in need of transformation at the time. But what does it do when we place it in 1973? It puts at our fingertips this font of music that was changing the world at the time. Motown, bell bottoms, you know.
Yeah, well, the show incorporates all of that.
Yeah, 5-inch platforms, you know, blue hair.
The way you used to dress back then,
exactly. Right? That's how I got my role in The Wiz, you know, being an unreconstructed hippie. But a mythology that is so colorful and so resourceful,
Yeah.
and that people have almost lost touch with until they come to see the show. And then, again, which is what the Classical Theater of Harlem is known for, breaking that fourth wall and moving people out of their comfort zones. Only this time, they leave in a state of exceeding joy. And what better way to feel during this time of the year?
And then they walk out into the new sanitized Times Square.
Yeah, but before they walk out, they go to the box office and buy more tickets. Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
You, of course, wouldn't have seen the original production, I guess, but did the original Langston Hughes version, what kind of music did that use?
It used the same discography of music that we use, but it was performed in a much more traditional sense, because the music is traditional gospel and traditional Negro spiritual, with a couple of new tunes written by our musical director, Calvin Bell. There's a piece that opens the show called Living on the Deuce, which is what we called 42nd Street back in the 70s. And that introduces us to the netherworld that then transforms into the church. So there are maybe 2 new original pieces in the show, but everything else
Was
in the American Gospel Negro Spiritual Songbook, orchestrated for our purposes by Calvin Bell.
And then the Classical Theater of Harlem had this wonderful idea to bring the Shangilia Youth Choir from Nairobi. Now, what can you tell us about how that happened?
First of all, I want everyone to know that Shangilia means rejoice in Swahili. And
these are the kids are all orphans, right?
I don't know if they're all
but some
orphans,
of them are.
but they certainly are all street children, marginalized to the edges of society, and would have been lost to the world, to say nothing of the theater in New York, had they not been saved by this concept of theater as crisis resolution, which even happens in Kenya, obviously. But what is most serendipitous about this story is that their American agent is the agent for the Classical Theater of Harlem. So Alfred said, oh, okay, we know what we can do. We can serve 2 masters here.
Yes.
Not only can we help the youth choir, but we can reserve them as our coup de grace for,
and then
for Black Nativity.
Susan Jonas from the Classical Theater of Harlem called us and told us they were coming, and we're so happy that this is all coming.
And you just came along for the ride.
Yeah, I came along for the ride.
Well, we want to bring you more of the Kenyan Youth Choir. So here is
Shangilia.
Shangilia. Rejoice.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round your Virgin Mother and Child. Oh, the
Yeah, you make me so proud. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed.
You guys are just wonderful. So this is not a bad sort of a backup singing group to have with you in the Black Nativity, is it, Andre?
Not at all. Not at all. I consider them our coup de grace.
Yes.
Because once we get out of there and deliver the joy, then we bring on the weapon of mass entertainment. That's Shangilia.
It's a very effective weapon. Now, what do you guys call Andre?
Hala.
Ask him what he calls.
Yeah, and what do you call Andre?
King Herod.
I think you've got Andre's number. All right, well, thanks a lot. You don't want to miss the Black Nativity, produced by the Classical Theater of Harlem at the Duke Theater on West 42nd Street, starring the great Andre de Shields.
That's me.
And upstaged only a little bit by the Kenyon Choir.
Shangilia.
Shangilia, thank you very much.
Now
Yeah.
through December 30th.
Happy holidays from Theater Talk. So
Whatever
long.
holiday you're celebrating. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're here at the first rehearsal of November. It's now November 26th. Dylan Baker, what do you do at the first rehearsal?
Well, in the first rehearsal, we all look at each other and say, my God, we're really going to do this. And then we read the play and listen to Nathan make us all laugh. Nathan is the President of the United States, and I think he's ready to assume office.
He's as good a bet as anybody at this point.
I think so. I think so.
What affected your decision to take this?
For this? Actually, I mean, they had Nathan, and they got Laurie, and they needed somebody to complete it. And as soon as I read it, I was like, oh, please let that be me.
Are you the kind of actor who knows his lines at the first rehearsal?
Well, for some things, I like to wait and see what's going on. And this one, it's so fast. Our first preview is on the 20th of December, so I'm working on those lines.
You're almost off book.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Is there going to be much of an improvisational feeling about this company, do you think?
Oh, I don't think so. I think, this, when you're with a playwright who writes this well, you don't want to improv on the lines. You want to get those. The ones he wrote down are pretty good.
This is like one of these date things. Not that I've ever been on one of those.
It's
those
like speed dating.
Speed dating, yeah.
Right.
Except you get to talk to a big Broadway star. This is Nathan Lane. So, how are you? Are you the kind of actor who comes to rehearsals with your lines memorized?
Yes.
They say that about you.
They say a lot of things about me.
You're always ready.
Well, in this case, I mean, honestly, we only have about 3.5 weeks to rehearse, and it's an enormous role. So it's something that's what I've been working on the last couple of months, is just preparing this and so yes, I have.
Well, when you say there's only 3.5 weeks, I mean, you strike me as this guy. You can get up and just, you improvise so well. You deal spontaneously so beautifully. Why is 3.5 weeks such a short time?
Well, because it's a new play, and ideally, it would be wonderful to have gone out of town, and you have a chance to take a breath and discover the play, and you're in a fishbowl here, as you know.
Oh, I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a quick 3.5. I remember 4 weeks of rehearsal, but they just told me 3.5. So, in that case, it was important for me to come in. I didn't want to have to be spending a lot of time worrying about just going home and doing the sort of the tedious task of learning it while rehearsing. I love to just keep reading the play, but and then after working on it during the day. But that just seems to be for me the best thing to do.
And this is a text like Shakespeare. This isn't going to be like Mel Brooks, where you can mess around with the lines.
No. I mean, there's no reason to.
You and Laurie Metcalf aren't going to cut up and change the show every night.
No. Well, it's not that sort of piece.
Yeah. What makes a David Mamet comedy a David Mamet comedy? I don't think of him as the master of hilarious plays. Is this got a lot of jokes, or is this
I think there's always been a lot of humor.
Well, Glenn Ross is on some levels hilarious, but it's horribly tragic.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's. I think it's his use of language and how people communicate with one another. I think that's what maybe is a signature of his, is what people say, what they don't say, how they say it. In this play, this particular president seems very dependent on his speechwriter, played by LAURIE METCALF, and it's an interesting dynamic of why he wants her to write this. He wants her to write this sort of inspirational speech, and he's a smart man, but he's a bit of a thug as well. And,
That's good for a president nowadays.
It's interesting. I think that maybe that's one of his signatures is the way he uses language, obviously.
Listen, knowing how horrible the fishbowl is here,
Yeah.
why did you agree to come in with a play? Knowing what that is, why are you doing it again?
Well, because of the play. The play was extraordinary. It's an extraordinary part. It's a director I've worked with several times, and a major Pulitzer Prize-winning author.
And just that was the deal; they couldn't take it out.
And I think it just was the timing for everyone. Just wasn't feasible. I think it was discussed at one point, but wasn't going to happen. But I believe in the play, and think I think it's doable. It's a little daunting, but it's also very exciting.
When did Nathan Lane come into your mind?
Well, Nathan Lane came into Joe's mind because Joe. There were, as I understand, like 3 phone calls made to put the thing together. I called Jeffrey Richard and said, "You want to do this play?" He said, "Yeah." And then he said, "Who you want to direct it?" I said, "Joe, of course."
You did such a great job with your last play.
And then Joe read it and said, "I want to do it. What do you think of Nathan?" I said, "I think it's kind of genius." So that's that.
Was the play all done at that point?
It was, it's not going to be all done until the people come, but it was done-ish.
Oh, so then you'll watch rehearsals and you'll make revisions.
That's right. Yeah.
How do you get so much done? You write on a schedule? Well, I'll first ask you that. Do you write on a schedule?
Yeah, the schedule is basically all day, every day. Yeah, it's fun. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, but still, it's just amazing. Aside from the level of what you write, just the fact that you are able to be so focused all the time. I mean, you have any pointers for young writers on how to bring such focus?
Yeah, sure. Get up early, get out of the house, throw away your computer, and you don't got to give young writers pointers. It's like because the young writers of today, as of any day, are the people who love to write. And if you love to write, you're going to do it. And if you do it, you're probably going to get better at it.
When did you think? At what point in your career did you think, "Oh, they get me now. I can make a career of this"?
Well, the first time I thought was they gave me I was just talking about Ross Whetstone with Jerry Tolmer over there, because Ross was like the head theater guy. In fact, I think he was the head of the Village Voices about 30-some years ago. And Michael Feingold was, then as now, the very influential drama critic of the Voice and a friend of mine. And Michael said, "Oh, they're having these things, the Obies Awards. I kind of heard of them." I said, "Yeah, I get it. You guys, the Voice, throw that award ceremony." He says, "Yeah, why don't you come?" I said, "Okay." And they gave me this award for the best plays of the year. And it suddenly struck me as I walked up to the stage. I guess there are these things called professional playwrights, and I guess I can be one of them.
This play, is there anything that you can tell us more about it, that it's about a president?
Yeah, it's about a president. The United States is about to get voted out of office because he's the worst president in history.
What makes him the worst?
Because, as his sidekick, Dylan Baker, says, he's fucked up everything he's touched.
Is he a right-wing president?
No, we don't know. He's just a president.
So, were you inspired by our current president?
I'm inspired by all the presidents.
So you won't commit yourself more than that?
No.
All right. So then what happens to him?
Oh, everything. So he decides he's going to make a couple bucks, put a couple dollars in his pocket because he got to go home. So he decides to pardon some turkeys, because the turkey manufacturers are going to give him $50,000 to pardon a turkey.
You think they're doing that now, maybe?
Yeah, they actually do it. I mean, we don't know about the $50,000 part, but we can assume that the president of the United States, his time is valuable.
So he pardons the turkeys, and then what happens?
Well, the question is how much you're going to pardon the turkeys for, because they wanted to pardon 2 turkeys, because last year one of the turkeys almost died. So this year they want to give him the same $50,000 for 2 turkeys as for 1 turkey. So he says, well, then you got to pay me $100,000.
What's your part in this play?
I'm the president's speechwriter, and I'm helping him to try and get reelected.
Do you have any problem with doing a play in New York where you're not going to be in previews? You're just going to be right here in the fishbowl of New York theater. You're not going out of town.
You know, I'm used to just rehearsing the show and mounting it right there in the city that we're in. So I've never done the other way. Is the answer. I've never tried out a show in another city in order to move it. So. Seems natural to me, but I know that it's risky.
I guess your work with Steppenwolf prepares you for that. That you're in this town, but that's a much more supportive theater town. In case you haven't noticed, I think so.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, they have. I mean, yeah, they're more grateful.
More grateful. They ride our ass sometimes. Yeah, hell yeah.
Now, you did Roseanne for how many years?
9 seasons.
If you had it to do over, would you have stayed there, done that long?
On Roseanne?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I loved every minute of it. Yes.
Yeah. Now, when you come to rehearsal, do you have your lines memorized here at the first rehearsal?
Generally, no. No, I don't. I try and I use the rehearsal period, and we have 3 weeks, so I use that to get off book.
And they're not looking at you to. I mean, David said he's going to keep rewriting up until till the opening night. So.
Oh really?
Yeah. I don't want to put any pressure on you.
Why bother to learn?
I think that's true. Well,
There's my point right there.
well, do you find that after you've done it for a while that it just goes in by osmosis, like the think system?
It does. To me, it's easier to learn them actually when you're on your feet.
Yeah.
And instead of, I've done it both ways, but with this part, I'll learn them on my feet.
I play a character named Dwight Grackle. He's the chief of the Micmac Nation, which I believe is fictitious.
What is the Micmac Nation?
It's an Indian tribe. As I say, I think David kind of conglomerated a bunch of different tribes, I think from the Algonquin sort of region or nation, and came up with Micmac, and I am their chief. And the president calls me, asks me, the president being Charles Smith, played by Nathan Lane, calls me in my capacity as tribal leader and asks me for a favor. And I, in return, ask him to honor the Treaty of Porcupine Cove. We exchange words, the conversation degenerates. We get off the phone, not in a polite way. I see fit to come down to see him right away so that I can express to him in person in no uncertain terms exactly how I feel about these issues. And that's about all I can say about that for now.
Do you have a big part in this play?
I do not. It's a very small part.
Do you know how many lines you have?
Oh, I don't know how many.
I'm a failed actress, but that's because I used to have to count my lines.
I've never counted lines, and I never will. No.
Your key to success. But listen, have you ever worked with Nathan Lane before?
No.
Or David Mamet?
No.
How did you get this job?
My agent got me an audition, and I booked it.
How cool is that?
I have one question. I'm going to ask David Mamet if he feels that play about postage stamps, Mauritius, is a homage or a complete ripoff. Will there be lawsuits, David?
Well, Dylan Baker is in this play.
And to me, he'll always be the beloved child molester from Happiness. How wonderful. I was rooting for him. Go, score that kid.
You have any questions for Nathan Lane?
I hope that we're out of what he called our Hitler years, when he didn't care for the things that I was writing.
Well, he likes you better than he does Michael Riedel.
Okay, yeah, everyone does. But
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the CORY and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
Playbill Online is the official website of Theater Talk and the home of the Playbill Club, providing information and opportunities for theater lovers. We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.